there, boils and ghouls! So we're gonna do things a little bit differently tonight than we normally do. Normally if I was doing like a horror related video, I would like script it, do the whole big thing, but I'm not feeling that today. It's been a long day. I just want to talk about it with my friends, and you guys are my friends. We're just gonna have a super casual, like, just hang out, chill, drink some tea. You can grab some tea or some coffee or whatever and join me while we talk about It Chapter 2. I'm excited. So, if you were just tuning in just to see if it's a good movie, if it's something that you should check out, I will say right off the bat that it was good. I very much enjoyed it. But it wasn't as good as the first one, which is not really a big surprise to anyone, because I feel like that's how most people expect sequels to be. Weirdly enough, I did expect it to be as good as the first one. I went in there with very high expectations, so I think the fact that I left satisfied at all is a compliment to the movie. I don't know if I'm going to be getting into spoilers or not here. I will by the time that this video is edited and uploaded. So I'll probably put in the description down below if I included spoilers. But for now, let's just chill and chat and talk about the movie. Like, we're just like two friends, you and me. It's just you and me, buddy. Just for the next however long this video is gonna be. Let's talk. So the movie opens up on another scene kind of like from the first movie. It's that whole, like, they introduce a character that's literally just there to die. And when I noticed that they were doing that again, I was a little bit concerned about how they were going to go about that, because if you remember the scene from the first movie, the whole Georgie scene, that scene was fucking brutal. Like, that set the tone for the movie. I know people who have a hard time watching that scene, not necessarily just because of the gore, but because that gore, like, it's a child getting their arm ripped off. It changes it a little bit when it's an actual child that's being subjected to this brutality. So I didn't really know how they were going to be able to top that. And I'm not going to say that they did top it, because the first movie still had a child getting his arm ripped off. Like, that's pretty dark. But that being said, I am satisfied with the opening scene with Adrian. If you've read the book, then you're probably already familiar with Adrian. It was one of those things that I heard discussed before the movie came out, even though I haven't read the book myself. Adrian is a gay man that ends up getting killed by Pennywise. I can't say anything about how it appears in the book because obviously I haven't read the book. But the way that that scene is shot in the movie, it is horrifying to watch. So the way that it plays out in the movie is Adrian is on a date with another man, and they're caught by some small-minded hicks from town that pull them aside, or wait until they get to a darkened place where nobody can, like, disturb them. And they separate the two and start beating them to hell. And I'm a bisexual woman, so I do have a horse in this race when it comes to, like, homophobic violence, but I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that it's likely that anything like that is going to happen to me. That's not the reason why I felt this scene so strongly. I live in a fairly, like, open-minded place. I do think that homophobic violence against women is very different than homophobic violence against men. I think it's very unlikely that anything like this will happen to me. But the very simple concept of being there and being present and being helpless while someone that you love is getting hurt. Like, honestly, I felt for Adrian's boyfriend so much in that scene, because I can stomach the idea of most things happening to me. I don't care. It's the idea of being unable to help someone that I love while something that horrifying happens to them, and like, I wasn't tearing up in the movie theater, but I was getting a little emotional, just trying to picture, like, if that was someone that I loved personally. It was a little hard to watch, I'm not gonna lie. After the homophobic bullies get finished with Adrian, they throw him over a bridge. His boyfriend runs to see if he can rescue Adrian, but he ends up getting there just in time to watch Adrian get killed by Pennywise. That scene wasn't as brutal as the beat-in scene. The beat-in scene was awful. But actually seeing Pennywise kill Adrian was, like, I could deal with that. Like, it's just normal. I'm a horror movie fan, I've seen worse. After Mike shows up and he sees signs that Pennywise was responsible for this, so it's time for the Avengers to assemble. He starts calling everyone up, and I'm going to make a note at this point. I feel like the way that it's handled in this movie, the whole Avengers assembling bit, I feel like it's handled so much better in this movie than it was in the original, the miniseries. Because in the miniseries, it was very repetitive. It was very like, hello, this is Mike, you need to come back to Derry. Hello, this is Mike, you need to come back to Derry. Hello, like, we get it. We understand. In this movie, they do cut out the conversations quite a bit, and they mostly just use each phone call as a means to introduce what the characters have turned into now that they are adults. I am going to say that I love this cast. They did a very good job of casting the adult versions of these characters. Not only do they look like the child actors, but they act like them, and they're great actors all on their own. Like, I think James McAvoy is an incredible actor, just on his own. I'm not a big comedy person, so I didn't really know what to expect from Bill Hader, but I do genuinely think that he was one of, if not the best part of the movie, and that's a character that could very easily be annoying. Like, I think that the first movie did a very great thing in casting Finn Wolfhard to play Richie, because Richie could be very easily annoying. You need a charismatic actor to be able to carry that role and not make it the most annoying person that you've ever seen, and I think that Finn Wolfhard did that very well in the first movie, and I think that Bill Hader did that very well in this movie. If there was a weak link in the movie as far as the characters go, I would have to say that it was probably Mike was the biggest weak link. He got the least amount of screen time. We explored his character and what his character desired much less. All of the other characters got Pennywise-related issues that they had to work through, but Mike didn't really get that. The biggest issues that Mike had is that obviously he wanted to assemble the Avengers, so he was very much focused on, we need to defeat Pennywise, this is what Pennywise is, we need to, like, get together and we need to kill him. The other thing that they kind of sort of hinted at with Mike is that he'd never left Derry, and there was this very strong hint that maybe he would have liked to travel, and he was a little bit disappointed with how his life had turned out, but even that wasn't explored all that well. It was just kind of hinted at every once in a while. The only other character that I think might have been a little bit weak is Beverly, played by Jessica Chastain, and trust me, it hurts to say that, because I love Jessica Chastain. I think she is an incredible actress. I think she's a very strong woman. I also think that she's a little bit sexy, but it's not biased. It is what it is. But my problem with, for each person, Pennywise represents something from their childhood that they still haven't gotten over. And for Beverly, that was abuse. She's still stuck in this system of abuse. She married her father, basically, which is a horrifying concept, and one that I think deserves a lot of exploration that didn't happen. I don't know why they decided to just kind of skim the surface of Beverly is dealing with a system of abuse. They just kind of skimmed the surface in the mini-series too, so this isn't something that, is a new issue. I feel like this might, I haven't read the book yet, but I feel like this might be an issue that just pervades the story of it altogether. And maybe part of the problem is that the way that it perpetrates itself over and over and over through generations, that is a complicated issue, and that is a hard one to tackle when you're also dealing with several other characters who also have childhood trauma and a killer clown. So I understand that there are other things that we need to divide our attention between. I just think that it would have been interesting to explore Beverly and the theme of abuse maybe a little bit more. But then again, that could be just me. Okay, anyway, we've got our characters together. Everyone's back in Derry. They first meet up at a Chinese food restaurant, and if you've seen the miniseries, you know the scene. They're all just chilling and having a good time, and everything's great, and Stanley's not there, and everyone's a little bit like, where's Stanley? But they're not super concerned about it either. And then the fortune cookies turn into horror shows. I will say that the special effects on the fortune cookies was much better this time around. I especially enjoyed that little eyeball thing. That thing was great. It's at the Chinese food restaurant, however, that we also established something else, which is that nobody remembers anything from the last movie. They barely even remember that they grew up in Derry. The only one that remembers anything is Mike, and that's just because he's the only one that never left Derry. But Ben still actively has a crush on Beverly, ever since he was a child. Like, he carries in his wallet his yearbook page, and Beverly was the only person that signed it. And a big deal is made out of that. Like, even before he receives a call from Mike, he's still looking at that yearbook page. And all I can think is, if he can't remember growing up in Derry, how does he, A, remember Jessica Chastain, and B, remember her enough to still actively have a crush on her? Like, I don't actively have a crush on the people that I had crushes on when I was, like, 12. I've kind of moved on. But that being said, Ben and Beverly are still fucking adorable. I ship them so hard, so I'll forgive that any amount is stupid because they're cute and I like it. It's also at the Chinese food restaurant where they discover that Stanley has chosen to die by suicide rather than face Pennywise again. This news affects Beverly in particular. Everyone just kind of decides that maybe facing Pennywise isn't such a good idea, so they just kind of stalk off, and I guess that they're all staying at the same hotel. I presume that Derry only has one hotel, but I don't know, I've never been there. So yeah, everyone leaves. Jessica Chastain is visibly upset through this whole time. The only person that stays with Mike, who is still preaching his whole Pennywise needs to die thing, is James McAvoy. He agrees to go home with Mike at the very least. So we're split between these two characters. Mike is showing James McAvoy this, like, leather pouch thing that he got off of magic Native Americans, because there always has to be magic Native Americans in these sorts of stories. Apparently the Native Americans had dealt with Pennywise in the past, and they knew of a ritual that would be able to get rid of him. What exactly this ritual is not revealed until the very, very end of the movie, and even then it's very loose. It's not the focus of the movie. The movie does not care about this ritual at all. The point of the movie is to focus on these characters and their growth and their development, which actually isn't a bad thing because the characters are definitely the strongest part of the story. I enjoy these characters. So through the power of magic Native Americans, Mike manages to convince James McAvoy that they need to defeat Pennywise. Everyone goes back to the hotel where Ben is questioning Jessica Chastain to try to figure out why she's so upset. Besides one of their childhood best friends committing suicide horrifically after you contacted him, but, you know, whatever. So Jessica Chastain at this point decides to reveal that she has been dreaming of all of their deaths and that she saw Stanley's suicide long before it happened in her dreams. What point does this serve? None. None at all. This never comes back. Besides just like a cute little throwback at the very end of the movie. Besides that, it really doesn't amount to much. Besides, you know, just frightening our characters and making them all think that they're gonna die. So everyone's frightened enough that they agree to help Mike defeat Pennywise, and apparently part one of this ritual involves going around town to their childhood memories and collecting something that was once important to them when they were children. This also forces all of them to confront their childhood traumas that they have not completely gotten over. I mentioned earlier that Beverly's childhood trauma is abuse, so she gets to go back to her childhood home and reminisce about her abusive father for a little bit. James McAvoy's big childhood trauma is confronting the death of Georgie. He still holds on to a lot of guilt because of it. Ben's childhood trauma appears to mostly be loneliness. Pennywise taunts him a lot about the possibility that he could die alone. It all ties back to him having been an overweight child and feeling very inferior as a result of his childhood weight. Eddie's childhood trauma is obvious if you've seen the first movie. It's illness and also his dependence on his mother. And last but not least, we have Bill Hader as Richie, and his childhood trauma is completely out of left field. If you've seen the first movie, it was not at all mentioned there, but apparently Richie is gay. I don't know if that was a thing in the books. Once again, I didn't read the books, but Richie's big thing is that he is gay, and he's been holding on to that since childhood, and he has been too afraid to tell anybody at any point in his life, which I'm okay with overall. I do think that Richie needed a childhood trauma because Mike was not given one, and once again, Mike just feels like the weak link here. I guess that Mike's childhood trauma is watching his parents die, but even that is very weakly mentioned in the movie. It comes up maybe once or twice. Richie being gay doesn't come up a whole lot, but it does get a big long scene dedicated to it. They don't outright say that Richie is gay. He doesn't have a big coming out moment or anything like that. It's just very heavily implied. I think that the reason why I'm okay with the idea of Richie being gay, at least partly, is because Pennywise very strongly feels like a metaphor through this whole movie. Like, obviously he was a metaphor in the first movie, but it feels much stronger this time. And I think that it's kind of interesting to personify internalized homophobia in that way. I think they could have gone further with it, like they could have gone further with Beverly, but once again, that might just be a side effect of having so many characters with so many different traumas that have to be explored. Okay. Moving on. The monsters. I wanted to talk about the monsters a little bit. The monsters are boring. I don't mean that entirely. Most of the monsters in this movie are monsters from the first movie, like the leper comes back. And it's an interesting design. I didn't hate it, but it did feel a little repetitive. I will go back to the fortune cookie beasts. I thought those were pretty cute, especially the little eyeball thing. I thought that was great. But as far as monsters that Pennywise turns into, that we only really get two new ones, and that is the old woman in the tea scene when Beverly goes back to her father's house. If you've seen the trailer, it's that scene. In the trailer, that scene kind of just ended with the old lady obviously turning into a monster off screen, but that was about all that you saw. In the movie, obviously she turns into a monster, and it's kind of not overly well designed in my opinion. I thought that it looked very similar to things like the leper and like the woman from the painting, in that it's just another creature that's very tall and very skinny and very bent over and kind of sickly looking. One big problem that I had with that monster, and I don't know if that's just because I'm immature or if this is something that everyone's gonna have issues with, is that the monster was naked, and I have absolutely no problem with nudity. But at the same time, when you have this scary old lady running at you and all that you can think are ab boobs, that might be a problem. Big floppy finger boobs, because they were long and skinny. I feel like she was creepiest when she was in like her normal human form, or when she was just like slinking in doorways and moving kind of awkwardly and creepy, and I did like that. That part was pretty great. The other new monster that Pennywise became is at the very end, so possible spoilers. If you haven't seen the miniseries, then this will probably be a spoiler. If you have seen the miniseries, then this will not necessarily be a spoiler. No, I don't think it would count as a spoiler if you've seen the miniseries or read the book. If you've seen the miniseries, Pennywise becomes a spider at the end of the miniseries. and it's basically just a spider. In this movie, he does become a spider at the very end, but he still has the upper body of Pennywise, which I think was a wise choice, because that way they still get to keep Bill Skarsgård. He can still do his creepy Pennywise act, because Bill Skarsgård is still amazing in this movie. Like, I do have some nitpicky complaints about this movie. Bill Skarsgård is not one of them. I still think that he does an amazing performance as Pennywise. Every scene that he was on screen, I was 100% like, yes. Let's talk about that ending. I'm not going to get into spoilers. I'm going to try to avoid spoilers anyway. I am going to talk about things in vague terms. I might mention a few things that, in my opinion anyway, should seem obvious. But I need to talk about the ending at least a little bit. Because the ending might be the thing that didn't kill the movie for me, but did make the movie less enjoyable. The ending goes on for a long time. You think that they've defeated Pennywise and then they haven't. And then you think that they've defeated Pennywise and then they haven't. And then you think again that maybe they defeated Pennywise this time, and then, oh look, there's Pennywise. And at a certain point, my eyes started glazing. I was like, okay, can we just defeat the clown already and move on? Eventually, Pennywise is defeated. And I was like, okay, thank God the movie's over. Except, then we had to see how they get cleaned off from the battle with Pennywise. And then we had to see the children versions of them get cleaned off after the battle from Pennywise. And then we had to see who gets together with who and where they go off from then. And then there was a suicide note from Stanley that they had to read. And it just went on for a long time. The thing that this ending reminded me of the most was a TV show. It felt like the ending to a long-running series where you've been with these characters for years, and you've gotten personally invested in these characters, and you've seen them at their high points and at their low points, and you really want to know that these characters are going to be okay. Except that this is movie 2. We've been with these characters a while. I am somewhat invested in them. I do care about these characters, but not enough to be reassured for 15 fucking minutes. I don't know if that's how long it was, but that's at least how long it felt. I didn't need that long to be reassured that they're gonna be okay. And I don't know, the suicide note from Stanley felt a little cheesy to me. I don't know if that appeared in the book, but if it did, then maybe that was one thing that they should have cut out. I will say that this movie is very funny. I was very impressed with the way that they were able to diffuse tension through humor. I think that it was a good move for them to get actors like Bill Hader in on there so that they could have more comedy, make it, like, overall just... I enjoyed it. So, in summary, final thoughts. I did enjoy this movie, especially the midpoint when they were exploring their childhood traumas and everyone was going out to collect all of their trinkets from when they were kids. Had a lot of fun bringing back the child actors. The child actors are still great. Like, they did a great job in the role. The adult actors did a great job in the role. Overall, it was an enjoyable experience that I would recommend watching. My biggest problem with the movie is that certain small things, like Ben still having a crush on Beverly, what the fuck is this ritual, those things do kind of not make sense, and they are a little bit noticeable, but they're not distracting until you reach that ending when it just won't fucking end, and you're sitting there like, why the fuck did Ben still actively have a crush on a girl that he knew when he was 12? Also, when can I go home? Because, like, fuck. I just think that overall, the first movie was a more solid, strong movie than this one. And that isn't to say that this is a bad movie, because I've seen a lot worse, and the first movie was great, so I went into this with really high expectations. So a lot of my complaints here could literally just be nitpicks. Anyway, I think that's about it for me. First of all, make sure that you go down to the comment section and tell me whether or not you enjoyed this movie. But secondly, the other thing that I want to know, if you're gonna head down to the comment section anyway, is tell me what you guys think about this more casual approach to my movie reviews. Just kind of like sitting here and chatting with you guys over tea. Just like we're like just friends, just hanging out and talking about movies, because I enjoy doing that, and it's kind of just relaxing to just sit here and talk about my thoughts on this movie. And anyway, on that note, like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to this channel to see some more horror content. Thank you guys for putting up with me, and I will see you guys next time. Love you!